Hey, what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged. For those who don't know me, I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, personally raised my own score from a 152 to a 175. Took me an entire year, though, and at least half of that was a total waste of time. If I'd done it properly, I probably could have knocked it out in just a few months because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you could spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them, and that's when your score really starts to improve. Now, because LSAT prep is difficult, it's stressful. I know a lot of you are struggling. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to as many folks as I can. If you're interested, you can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call. I'll be happy to help you out. unpluggedprep.com/start. Now, I want to start doing more of these live streams in the coming days and weeks because I've been making videos on YouTube pretty consistently for the past 7 years or so. And what I feel is really missing is interaction with all of you. It's one thing to just make a video to a camera, have it edited and posted up later. It's a lot different to just connect live with so many of you who are studying for the LSAT in the midst of your own journeys. And I know a lot of you are taking the LSAT in a couple weeks in October. And so I want to support as many of you as I can. And so I thought I would share some thoughts on studying for the LSAT in the final weeks in the lead up to the test. And then if there's time, I'll take as many questions as I can from all of you watching live. If you can't make it today, that's okay. I'll be doing videos. I'll be doing live streams in the coming days and weeks as consistently as I can. Now, in the final weeks before the exam, I want to recommend that you make a significant shift from learning to polishing and practicing. Learning is reading textbooks, watching videos, maybe doing some drills. But in the final weeks, hopefully, at that point, you either know it or you don't. This is not the time to be learning something new for the first time or to try out some radically different or new approach. This is the time to refine things. Now, I know there's a lot of different material on the LSAT to learn. There are roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions. There's reading comprehension as well. But then you've also got to pull it all together, doing individual timed sections to work on your pacing, and of course, endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. Now, if you haven't learned the basics yet, you might want to consider pushing back your test date. I don't mean to sound harsh on this, but you really want to consider, is this the time to be learning the basics for the first time when your test is only a few weeks away? Given the importance of the LSAT, it might be worth considering pushing back your test a month or a couple of months. The October LSAT is coming up soon, but if you were to push it back to November, you're more than doubling the time remaining between now and your test. And if you were to push it back to January, you would be more than tripling the time available. And January is not too late. You can still take the test in January and apply to law school this cycle. Now, of course, all else being equal, it's better to apply earlier than later. But the thing is that not all else is never equal, because if you give yourself more time, you can improve your score and then you are a stronger candidate. And law schools have no incentive to care about when you applied. They only have incentive to care about the score that you apply with. And so if you are at a stage where you feel like you need more foundational work and you don't only need to polish and practice and refine, then you might want to push it back. What I recommend spending the final weeks doing is taking full exams and reviewing them in depth. Ideally, 2 exams a week if you're studying full-time. If you're studying part-time, 1 exam a week is fine. 2 exams a week would give you 6 full exams under real-world test day conditions in the final weeks. Hopefully, you've done a few of those already. And then on the days that you're not doing full exams, you're doing individual timed sections. You are no longer doing isolated drills. I know drills feel great because you get that immediate feedback, but test day is not a drill. And you can't take 4 individual sections, add them up and call that an exam because endurance matters. You also can't take 75 different drills, add those up and call it a full exam either, because pacing matters too. You want to take full practice tests, as many as possible without burning out, under real exam conditions in one sitting. That means 4 sections back to back with only a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3. And that's it. Too many students drop from their practice to the actual by as many as 5 to 8 points because they were not properly simulating test day conditions. And of course, there are ways to mitigate it. For example, doing lots of full exams. But if you want to score, say, a 170 on test day, you probably want your practice test average going in to be at least a 175. So you've got a buffer in case you have a bad proctor or a tech issue. You want to be scoring 170 on your worst day and hopefully doing better, assuming that everything goes smoothly. Now, the reason that we emphasize taking so many practice tests is because we want test day itself to feel like just another run through. And every question that you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. It's not just to practice. It's not just to measure yourself. It's to give yourself the chance to get things wrong so that you can learn from those mistakes. So you're making them now and not on test day. Now, the framework that we use with our students is called the Socratic review method, similar to what you do in law school, because we're not going to be there on test day. We can't take it for you as much as we'd love to. We just can't do that. And so we got to give you the confidence, the clarity, and the skill to perform for yourself when it truly matters. And so we ask you a series of guiding questions live in coaching. Of course, you can adopt this for your own self-study process as well. And if you'd like my support with this, of course, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson at unpluggedprep.com/start. Now, the Socratic review method, the way we run it is we ask you a series of questions. For example, was your mistake in the stimulus or passage? Was it in the question stem? Or was it in the answer choices? If it was in the stimulus or passage, we look at what about the stimulus or passage made it difficult? Was it the complex wording? Was it the topic? Was it LSAC's failure to include clear indicator words like thus or therefore for the conclusion, or because or since for the evidence? Was it them including annoying words like unless, except, until, or without, rather than including clear conditional indicator words for sufficient and necessary conditions? If your mistake was in the question stem, was it because LSAC used unfamiliar wording to refer to a common question type? Or are you just weak in a certain question type, in which case, of course, you might want to drill that one on the side? And if your mistake was due to something in the answer choices, was it a tempting wrong answer, or was it an unappealing right answer? If it was a tempting wrong answer, what about the choice made it tempting, and what ultimately made it wrong? If it was an unappealing right answer, what about the choice made it unappealing, and what ultimately made it correct? Because you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you can get to the root cause of your mistakes, what you're getting wrong and why, you're likely to end up making the same mistake again. And so that's why we use this Socratic review method framework live in our coaching. And of course, you can also adopt it for your own self-study. Now, one mistake I'll see students making in the final weeks is they've already decided, hey, I love logical reasoning and I hate reading comp, or I love reading comp and I hate logical reasoning. And so they do more of what they love at the expense of what they don't love. And the thing is that you are probably going to get more of a return focusing on your weak areas because there's more of a gain to be had, probably more low-hanging fruit. So for example, let's say that you hate reading comprehension and you're consistently getting, say, -12 in reading comp and you're only getting -4 in logical reasoning. Well, reading comp, there's 12 potential raw score points to be gained there. In logical reasoning, even if you double across the two sections, you only have 8 potential raw score points to gain. And it's a lot easier to go from, say, -12 to -8 in reading comp than to go from -4 to -0 in logical reasoning. So for reading comprehension, we'd look at, what is your note-taking approach? Are you highlighting? Are you diagramming? Are you underlining? Are you having trouble allocating time between the passage and the questions? In logical reasoning, we would look at your pacing similarly as well, maybe particular weak areas there too. But regardless, we design your study plan as such to focus more on your weak areas because, especially with limited time in these final weeks, we got to focus on what's going to give you the biggest return for your time invested since you have pretty limited time. We also don't want you to try out some radically different new approach in the final weeks or use some radical brand new resource for the first time. At this point, it's time just to refine and polish when you only have a few weeks remaining. If you are more than 10 points out from your goal score and you only have 3 weeks left, I hate to say it, it might be worth pushing back to a later test date to allow yourself more time to reach your fullest potential. Nobody ever wants to hear that, but the truth is that it's worth delaying just another month or so if it could get you significantly more points. Now, in logical reasoning, we've got roughly 15 different types of questions. We've got, of course, conclusion, strengthen, weaken, flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on, parallel, resolve. But out of those, not all questions show up with equal frequency, meaning some are more common than others. And so when we have limited time, only a few weeks left, we focus on the highest leverage areas, the highest yield areas that give you the biggest bang for your buck. In logical reasoning, the three most common types are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And so even if your accuracy percentage is lower on parallel reasoning than on inference, it might still be worth focusing on inference more because there are more of those questions, more room for potential improvement. And so we look at, for example, are you crystal clear on the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption? For inference, are you clear on must be true versus most strongly supported? Are you clear on how to identify a flaw and the difference between a flaw question and a weakened question? You would be surprised at how many students are not clear on those critical distinctions, and just clearing up one of those, one misconception regarding a particular question type, could right away in one coaching session get you 3 to 5 more questions right. It's crazy, but that's what happens when you get personalized feedback for the first time, because when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. In reading comprehension as well, a lot of students will get bogged down or stuck, spending far too long taking notes, highlighting, underlining on some third-party platform when they don't even realize that Law Hub and Prometric look and feel different. And unfortunately, the highlighting and underlining tools are kind of glitchy and imprecise, so you don't want to be reliant upon them under strict timed conditions. Speaking of which, pacing is huge. A lot of students have good accuracy untimed, but things fall apart when we introduce timing. But of course, the exam is timed and the time constraint is unreasonable by design. So you've got to manage your pacing. You've got to develop some clear and consistent checkpoints. For example, you want to solve the first 10 questions in logical reasoning in roughly 10 minutes to build up a time bank that you can then apply to tougher questions later in the section that truly need and demand that time. Now, I mentioned that students typically drop at least 5 to 8 points from the practice to the actual. And some of you are wondering, how can you avoid experiencing that test day score drop? One of the best ways to mitigate a score drop is through proper preparation. If you can choreograph and rehearse test day down to the finest, to the most minute details, test day itself will ideally be like just another run through. And so we've got to get a little bit OCD here in the weeks leading up to the test. You rehearse it now, you refine it and perfect it now so that test day you can go on autopilot. That means, for example, you take your practice tests at the same time of day, you'll take the actual. And so if you want to take your actual at, say, 1 p.m., you take your practice tests at 1 p.m. as well. And if you're working standard 9 to 5, maybe you do your practice tests on the weekends and you sacrifice your weekends for the next 3 weeks till test day. That way you can choreograph also your time of day that you wake up, when you eat your breakfast, when you eat lunch, when you drink or don't drink caffeine, for example. You replicate the test day environment as well. And so if you're taking it remotely from home on your own device in your own apartment or house or dorm room, whatever, you take it at the same desk with the same scratch paper, same pencils and pens. Ideally, roommates, family, significant other, whoever are all out of the house, so they're not going to interrupt you, not use up your precious internet bandwidth watching Netflix or something or going on Zoom calls. You also practice your break timing and your snack routine. That means that you're doing 4 sections back to back, only a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3. You drink your coffee or water or whatever before the exam during the break. You eat your granola bar, banana, whatever before the exam during the break, same deal. And you rehearse the timing so that you don't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of a section or something. You'd be surprised how often it happens because nerves are real too. You ideally also want to be using a wired Ethernet connection for your computer so that you're not relying on shaky, unreliable Wi-Fi. If you don't have a modem, if you don't have an Ethernet cable, maybe you're ordering those things now so they come a week or 2 in advance of test day so you're not running out to Best Buy the morning of the exam or something. Now, stress, anxiety, nerves, they're all real because test day matters. The LSAT is important. We all know that. So you want to accept that you're never going to feel 100% ready. And you want to clear your mental space of anything that could stress you out. That means you're avoiding LSAT forums, Reddit, you're not doom scrolling or whatever in the final weeks and days. You're not comparing yourself to other people's perfect practice test scores. You're focusing only on your own journey, looking back at your trajectory up to this point. Hopefully you've seen some improvement. Hopefully you'll see some more improvement in the final weeks, but only compare yourself to who you were yesterday, last week, last month, and you see how far you've come. And pre-test nerves are real. Everybody has them. And you want to build some rituals, some habits to calm yourself in the final days and weeks. That could involve mindfulness meditation, focusing on your breath. It could involve prayer. It could involve exercise or working out. It could involve doing 10 jumping jacks or 10 push-ups to build up some adrenaline, some sweat, some stress, to replicate or stimulate or provoke your body to have a nervous system reaction similar to what you'll have on test day, just due to the mental nerves of knowing it's the real thing. You might also book a future test date for peace of mind, even if you don't even plan to take it, so that you know that it's not all riding on your one test coming up. So if you're taking it in October, for example, you would register for November or January so that you know, worst case scenario, you have a bad proctor, you have a tech issue, you freak out. You know that you have another at-bat coming up in another month or a couple months, just for peace of mind. I also want to talk about factors like sleep, diet, exercise, and meditation, because all of those play a role at helping you perform 110%. I don't know if you've ever taken a practice test, you're hungover or sleep deprived, but performance is not as good. Now, obviously, there are ways to avoid being hungover. Just don't drink the night before. To avoid being sleep deprived, you just go to bed at a consistent time, regardless of whether it's a weekday or a weekend. You sacrifice your next 3 weekends before the exam so that you're at your best. Because your body doesn't know if it's the weekday or the weekend. All it knows is that you're tired because you didn't get enough hours. And so let's say you go to bed at 10 p.m. every single day for the next 3 weeks, and you wake up consistently at 6 a.m. for the next 3 weeks. Then even if you're taking your exam at 9 a.m., you've got 3 full hours between waking up and taking it to wear off any grogginess or sleep inertia so that you're going to be at your best. You also are going to be consistent with your caffeine intake. You're not doing anything new or crazy on test day. If you normally drink a cup of coffee, drink one on test day. But don't suddenly drink 3 if you never drink any. Do some light exercise. That could be weights or yoga or cardio, whatever you like, whatever is your preference. That will help you reduce stress. Don't make it a crazy hard workout, but a little bit to boost up your brain power. There is a brain-body connection, of course. In terms of test day logistics, LSAC is really strict about your government photo ID. You can't use some random college ID. It's not the same thing. And you want to make sure that your name matches. And so if you got married and your one ID says your maiden name, one says your actual name, your official legal name today, make sure those are consistent. Work out the kinks. If one has a middle name, one has a full name, make sure that those are consistent as well. It's probably easier to change it with LSAC than to change it with the DMV. So reach out to LSAC now to get it adjusted if necessary. Also think about what you're going to wear on test day. I recommend wearing comfortable clothing. Sweats are fine. Might want to dress in layers, because some of these test centers, if you're taking it with Prometric at one of their testing centers, some of them are pretty cold with the AC, or maybe the AC is broken and they're hot. So you want to wear a couple of layers so that you can dress or undress as you need to. You also want to show up early or be ready to log in early. Don't risk being late to log in, but be ready or aware that the proctor might be late. And so don't expect to start the second that the exam is supposed to start. Now, the day before, day of, taper down your study intensity. I don't ever recommend taking a full exam the day of or day before. We don't want you to burn out. We want you to feel fresh going in. We also want you to do some light review, but not full tests in the days prior. If it would stress you out to not study, then do a little bit, but keep it light. Maybe do a favorite reading comp passage, one you've done before. Maybe a couple of logical reasoning questions you've seen before. This is not to test yourself. It's just to kind of go through the motions so that test day itself you'll be feeling fresh, but you're not feeling rusty either. And trust in your prep up to this point. Go in feeling confident because you've already built the foundation. Now it's only time to execute and refine. Now, I'm happy to take some questions if anybody has any about what to be doing in these final weeks and final days. If you're taking it in October, of course, I'd love to help you out there. But if you're taking it later in, say, November, January, February, yesterday I had somebody taking it in June, and I'm happy to give more long-term study advice as well. I'll get to as many questions as I can. Now, I've got someone asking here what to do if you are not able to fit in 10 full exams before the big day. Should you push back your test date? My thought here is not necessarily, because while it would be ideal to do 10 full exams before the big day, if you've only done 5, that might be enough. The idea is, are you at or close to your goal score? And do you feel like you've done enough to simulate test day conditions? Is your pacing solid? Is your endurance solid? If you feel like test day is going to go smoothly and you've done it all before, then maybe 5 exams is enough. But also consider that you've still got 3 weeks left. And so even if you could only do 2 exams a week for the next 3 weeks, you could add in another 6 exams. If you've done 3 or 4 already, you do another 6, you're now close to that benchmark of 10. If you can only do 1 exam a week, that's also fine. But don't do 4 separate sections over the next 4 days, then add them up and say to yourself, this makes a full exam, because it's not the same thing. Endurance matters. Now, even if you're working part-time or you're in school part-time, you probably can still fit in an exam or 2. Maybe you do 1 Saturday morning and you do 1 Wednesday evening. All you've got to do is be able to block out 2.5 hours or so for a full sitting. And if you can't do 2.5 hours, if you could only do 1 hour, if you could stretch it to 1 hour 10, that's 2 sections back to back. That's still going to help with your endurance. And that is still better than not doing anything at all. Now, if you haven't done any full exams in your three weeks prior, definitely I want you to put in all 6 over the next 3 weeks, doing 2 exams a week. If you can't do that, then I'd think about pushing back your test date, because drilling alone is not enough. Reading textbooks is not enough. And the LSAT, I'll be frank, it's the biggest factor in the law school admissions process. So you do want to give it due consideration. You do want to make it a focus. I'm not saying that it always has to be the number one priority in life. I know that a lot of us have families and kids, or we're in school or have classes. And so we can't give it 40 hours a week, but I don't think that you need to. Even just 10 to 15 hours a week of solid focused studying is enough time to make steady forward progress. And if you add that up over the course of 3 weeks till October, or over the course of 3.5 months till January, that scales really nicely. You might only need to put in a couple hundred hours total to get yourself to a 170 plus. Part of that's going to be foundational work, reading textbooks, watching videos, doing courses. Part of that's going to be joining webinars, or ideally smaller, more intimate environments where you can actually ask questions live from the instructor and get feedback on your approach. And part of it will ideally be some one-on-one support, maybe with a study buddy. Better if it's with a coach or an expert, or someone who's actually done this for a living for a significant period of time. And by the way, of course, if you're looking for help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons with as many students as I possibly can. I've blocked off a lot of time on my calendar to have these meetings. All you got to do is go to unpluggedprep.com/start to book a call with me personally, and I'll walk you through the process, the review, whatever questions you have. I'll be happy to answer as many of them as I can. I really do want to meet with as many of you as I possibly can, because I know the process is stressful, and I want to do whatever I can to ease the load. Now, I got a question here asking about longer term study timeframes. If you're taking the LSAT in April or June, how would you study if you were starting from scratch? So very different from someone taking it in only 3 weeks. We have 58 numbered exams in the new LSAT format, numbered 101 to 158. LSAC renumbered the exams after the removal of logic games after the June 2024 exam. And so don't use outdated textbooks that talk about logic games. Don't use the old books of prep tests, even if they're cheaper, because your LSAT prep is too important to be using outdated materials. LSAC has put these 58 exams on their Law Hub platform at lsac.org. You can get 4 of them for free. And then if you pay them $120 a year for Law Hub Advantage, you get all 58 in the modern test day format. Now, you don't need to work through all 58 to get a great score. When I interviewed a guy who used to write LSAT questions on the YouTube channel, he told me that if you only did 10 exams and knew those 10 exams inside out, that would be more than enough to get you a top score. And I really do agree with that. But regardless, if you've got the time, it's worth working through as many of these as you possibly can. And so I would save, say, the first 20 exams, 101 to 120, to do as untimed work, just getting the lay of the land. So that means you do a section, you see the grab bag of different types of logical reasoning questions, for example, and then you figure out which ones you are less good at, to be frank. So maybe you don't like strengthening questions. Maybe you don't like weakening questions. And then, of course, you're going to want to look into some foundational material to learn the basics of how to approach each section and each question type. You want to make some kind of study plan for yourself where you can work through each of those 15 different types of logical reasoning questions. You also, of course, want to look at reading comprehension as well, the different topics in reading comprehension, natural science, social science, humanities, and law. And if you were to do those 20 exams, you would, of course, get a pretty good cross-section of each of those different types. Then you'd say to yourself, okay, well, I struggle with these particular types. Now I'm going to drill these questions by type. Now at LSAT Unplugged, we have all of the questions from all the exams categorized by type, and we link those for you in your personalized day-by-day study plan. So we can work you through it. But regardless, of course, you're going to look at your time available and say to yourself, I have 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, whatever it is. You block off the time on your calendar. And each study session, you sit down and you focus on one of those types in particular. You do that for the next couple months. Then, let's say in month 3, you start working on individual sections to figure out your timing. You figure out how you're going to allocate your time over the course of the section. In logical reasoning, the earlier questions are easier. In other words, they go in a general order of difficulty, getting progressively harder as the section goes on. So ideally, if you're aiming for a 165 or above, which I hope you are, of course, you want to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes or so, build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later that truly need and deserve that time. In reading comprehension, you want to allocate your time differently between the passage and the questions. You have an average of 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage, but of course, some passages are harder than others. So you want to solve the easier ones in maybe 6 or 7 minutes, which yes, it is possible to do, so that you have more like 11, 12 minutes for the harder passages later. And so maybe you love humanities and you hate natural science. So hopefully that means that all else being equal, you'll be able to solve the humanities passages faster so that you have more time for the tougher natural science passages. Now, some students will ask me, do I have to do all 4 passages? Or can I do only 3, focus on those 3, and skip the 4th? That sounds like a really nice idea, but the problem is it sets a ceiling on how high you can score. I hate to say it, but it's true. If you leave out 1 passage, that means that you are sacrificing 7 questions. And if you bubble in all of those randomly, on average, you'll get 1, maybe 2 of those right, but you're still losing 5 or 6 raw score points. And out of 75 raw score points to be gained, because there's 3 sections on the scored LSAT portions, you're losing roughly 10% of those. So you're probably not going that you attempt. It's just the nature of things. So you've got to be able to attempt every question on the LSAT. And I know the time constraint is unreasonable. The LSAT is specifically designed so that most people will not be able to finish the questions in the time allotted, which is crazy. It sucks, but it is what it is. We can't argue about it. We just got to level up to meet the challenge. So you've got to devote at least a month or 2, ideally, to doing just timed work. And so many students these days love drilling questions because there are a lot of programs that make it easy to do that, but test day is not a drill. You've got to be able to do the questions in the time allotted, which means you're doing them in the context of a full section to work on your pacing, so that you can do the first 10 questions in logical reasoning in roughly 10 minutes. You can then slow down on the tougher questions that truly need it. You flag and skip a couple. You get to the end of the section, hopefully with 3 minutes or so to spare. Then you can go back and tackle the tougher ones later that you flagged and skipped. And then with the fresh perspective of having broken out of that tunnel vision previously, with the second look, you will ideally be able to take those questions you flagged and skipped and eliminate whatever you were down to 2. You knock one of those out and hopefully you get it right. You do this enough times, you're going to have a certain sense or a certain intuition for which questions are the best candidates for skipping. For me, it's going to be the harder parallel reasoning questions, the sciencey questions, the ones with more technical language that are more abstract, like on philosophy and morality. Usually, these are going to be numbered 15 through 22 or so in the section. In other words, the first 10 are the easiest, 11 through 14 still aren't too bad, but then 15 to 22 or so are where they get the hardest, and then the last couple are marginally or slightly easier. But out of those 15 through 22, I'm flagging, even myself, I'm flagging 3 or 4 of those just because I don't want to deal with them in the moment and I don't want to lose my momentum. I want to build up my morale and confidence by locking down as many points as I can so that I can get to the end of the section and only then go back into myself and say, okay, well, these were the few that I just didn't feel great about. But now that I know I've locked down everything else, I'm going to go back and give these another look. And hopefully I hammer away at them and I get a few more right. Oh, and by the way, here's the crazy thing. Sometimes you get this choice where you don't even understand what it's saying and you can't parse out how it relates to the stimulus or the argument. But you can't eliminate a choice just because you don't know what it says. That has no bearing on whether it's right or not. But if you have been able to eliminate all the other choices, then by elimination, this one remaining choice, even if you don't understand what it's saying, by default, it's got to be the right answer. If you have been able to eliminate the other 4. And I can't tell you how many questions I got right that I didn't even deserve to get right, just because I was willing to choose a choice that I didn't fully understand. And this is where we get into test-taking tactics. Because it is in the nature of a standardized test that you don't need to know the answer. You've just got to be able to eliminate the 4 wrong answers. And so it's not about getting them right. It's about getting them right under test-to-take conditions specifically, which means that in a multiple choice exam like the LSAT, you just get careful and tactical and strategic with that process of elimination. So please don't ever eliminate a choice because you don't know what it's saying, but make sure that you know what the question is asking, because there are so many times where I see students again and again choose the right answer to the wrong question. For example, we might be looking at a conclusion question in logical reasoning, and there is a really tempting wrong answer that is a general principle or a sufficient assumption. But that is not what they're asking you for. They're asking you for the conclusion. And so even if a principle is thematically aligned with the argument, that doesn't make it right. We are looking for what is the main point of the argument in front of us right now. And that is going to be more narrow in scope, more narrow in focus than the principle that would, if true or if valid, guarantee the argument. I forget what the actual question was here, but I hope that I answered it as I went on a tangent to a lot of other areas that I hope were useful for all of you. Thanks for the great questions. Please keep them coming. Question asking, what about the writing sample? So my answer here is, well, what about it? The writing sample is unscored. And so until you have locked down your goal score, until you are consistently practice testing at or above your goal, I wouldn't give it any attention or any focus. Making your writing sample significantly better is not nearly as important as getting you 1 more point on the LSAT. And if that 1 more point is between a 169 and a 170, optics matter. That is incredibly important to gain that additional point. There is data showing that even law school admission officers themselves are not immune to the bias of the optics around a 1.7 versus a 169. So please lock down the 170. It matters a whole lot more. Now, the writing sample, you can take it up to 8 calendar days prior to the LSAT. That's when it opens up until even after the LSAT. So my recommendation is focus on the LSAT until you've taken it. Lock in your score. Study hard. Get yourself above the 170 threshold at minimum. Then, and only then, do we switch gears and look at the writing sample. Now, I recommend after test day, take a day or two off because you deserve it. You've worked hard. You've gotten to test day. You've taken it officially. Stressful as it is, you take a day or two off to relax, recuperate. Then and only then we look at the writing sample. Now, LSAC changed the writing sample about a year ago. Now it is called argumentative writing, where they give you 15 minutes to plan based on source material and take some notes, then 35 minutes to write your argumentative essay. Now, you want to basically just take the source material, pull it together, marshal it as evidence in support of an argument, use the full 35 minutes, make it count, take it seriously, don't treat it like a joke. But if you have been through college, if you have decent writing ability, you're probably going to be fine. Just make a coherent, structured argument, use multiple paragraphs, use the source material, intro paragraph, body, maybe a third body, and conclusion. I don't want to say too much more about it than that because the scored portions of the LSAT just matter so much more. Look at it from the law school's perspective, right? It's LSAT score, then GPA, then everything else, your softs, like your personal statement, optional essays, addenda, resume, character and fitness, letters of rec, all that good stuff. But first and foremost, LSAT and GPA. The process is primarily numbers driven. It is all about the data, all about the stats, because that's what the law schools report to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls that data for inclusion in the ever important US News and US News and World Report rankings for law school. And those rankings still carry a lot of weight, even though they shouldn't. That dictates prestige. It dictates donations the law schools get. Employers, to some extent, pay attention to that. And of course, if you want access to the best jobs, then they matter as well. But really, I want you to look at it more from the perspective of what will get you the best admissions outcomes now. Because if you can get into a law school above their medians, above the quote unquote average of their previously admitted students last year, the higher up you are above those medians, the more likely you are to get significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. And sticker price tuition at law schools is on the order of $70,000, even $80,000 a year at a lot of schools. And so if you could save yourself $200,000, maybe even $250,000 in tuition, it's well worth fighting for a few more points on the LSAT. Getting a higher LSAT score, getting more scholarship money is some of the easiest money you'll ever make just by studying for the LSAT for a month or two. Well worth the investment of time and money in getting yourself a higher score. Argumentative writing does very little to help you get there. It tells law schools this person knows how to write. Their English abilities are not a joke. They want to maybe compare it to your personal statement to make sure that you actually can write that well. If they have any concerns over your English fluency, if you're a non-native English speaker, if you're applying from outside North America, if your English grades in college were terrible, then maybe they'll give it a bit more attention, a bit more of a look. But mostly, they care about your LSAT score and your GPA. And the thing is that your GPA is probably pretty set in stone at this point. You're probably, if you're watching this now, you're probably already a junior, if not a senior in college, or you already graduated more likely. And so even taking a few more college classes to boost your GPA is going to have a pretty marginal or negligible impact on your chances of getting into law school in terms of improving your GPA. But if you study for the LSAT more seriously, level up your prep by getting some more support. And by the way, if you are looking for help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons. Just go to unpluggedprep.com/start, and I'll be glad to meet with you personally to help you out with your LSAT journey. If we can get you a few more points, that's going to do way more to get you better admissions outcomes, get you into better law schools, get you into higher ranked schools. If you want to go to the T14, for example, their medians are all 170 to 175. And if your GPA is below the medians of 3.8, 3.9 because of grade inflation, it's pretty high. If you're below 3.8, then you want to be above 174 ideally to maximize your admissions outcomes. And so if there's anything I can do to help you out in these last 3 weeks based on what I shared today, or beyond that, if you're going for, say, November or January or February or April or June or beyond, I want to do whatever I can to help you out to get you the highest LSAT score possible. And until you're at the 170s and above, I don't want to talk writing sample or argumentative writing. I want to talk about getting you the highest LSAT possible. That comes down to, again, supporting you on your journey. Get away from the drilling, get away from the textbooks, focus more on taking individual sections and pacing with endurance and full-length exams, because it's not enough to get them right. You got to get the questions right under test day conditions. Simulating test day, reviewing your mistakes in depth, using the Socratic review method, that's what it's all about. And so anything I can do to help you out, again, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons, unpluggedprep.com/start, zero obligation, zero money down. I just want to help as many students as I can. So please click over to that link in the video description below this video on YouTube. I want to help as many of you out as I can. In the meantime, folks, it was a pleasure. I'll wish you all the best and take care.